أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope all of you are doing great. Today inshallah we are going to be addressing a very important concept, and that concept is the difference between what's known as an ism file and file. All right. So ism fa'il and fa'il, these two terms are often confused with each other, and especially those who have just begun learning Arabic or they come across these two terms for the very first time in their lives, they often confuse these two words together, or rather these two terminologies from each other. Okay. So this is what inshallah we are going to be focusing on in this lesson, that what is the difference between fa'il and ism fa'il. All right, and the same concept is then going to be applied between these two, ism maf'ul and maf'ul. Okay, so if your concept regarding ism fa'il and fa'il is clear, your concept between ism maf'ul and maf'ul would be clear too. Okay, so let's begin our lesson, and of course we are going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this task easy for us to understand as well as to teach. So Rabbi Yassir wala tu'assir wa tammim bil khair, Amin ya Rabbal Alameen. And we have our sample sentence in English. Okay, now I want you to pause the screen and identify the verb, the doer, and the object from this sample sentence. Okay, pause the screen, give it 5 seconds or so, and then um, play the screen again, play the video again. All right, so I hope that you guys labeled this as verb. Okay, then this teacher is going to be the doer. Okay, and this teacher over here is going to be the object. Okay, I'm not getting into subject and object, these kind of things. Simply remember, by now you should be knowing what a fa'il and maf'ul is. Okay, so I hope that you guys labeled it this way. Now let's build on this concept or this example. So as you can see, this is our verb, right? This, or rather this over here, can be labeled as fa'il, right? And this over here can be labeled as maf'ul, right? So once again, I want you to notice one thing here, that the word remains the same. Okay, the word over here is a teacher and the word over here is also teacher, but in one scenario, in fact, within the sentence, the very same word has been used in two ways. Okay, within the sentence, in one case, the very same word has been used as a, or rather has been labeled as a fa'il, and in the very same sentence, the same word has been used as a maf'ul. It has been labeled as a maf'ul, right? So what I want you to remember, or rather what I want you guys to observe and conclude, is that the terms fa'il and maf'ul are simply the labels or the tags that each word has in a sentence. Okay, so the terms of fa'il and maf'ul are actually the grammatical entities. Okay, they do not have any relationship with the structural meaning of the word. Okay, so they're all the grammatical entities, fa'il, maf'ul. It doesn't matter what word I use here. Okay, it could mean anything. Okay, so there is no relationship between the structural meaning of any word and the grammatical entity. Okay, so as you can see, the word teacher here has been used as a fa'il as well as a maf'ul. Okay, so what have I written here? That in both the grammatical entities, the literal meaning of the word teacher remains the same. Okay, so we have the word teacher, which means somebody who teaches, right? Over here as well and over here as well. But that same word that has the literal meaning of quote unquote someone who teaches has been used in two different ways, bearing two different grammatical labels. Okay, so the literal meaning of the word teacher remains the same, someone who teaches. Okay, but the label that is carried by this word in both of these situations is different. The label here is that of a maf'ul, and the label here is that of a fa'il. Okay, so what can we conclude? That we have the grammatical versus structural entities. Okay, so we have the grammatical entities, and they are actually the labels of fa'il and maf'ul. Okay, so there are tons of other grammatical labels, and actually we have spent a lot of time so far studying those labels. Okay, so we have studied zarf, muzaf, muzaf alayh, harf jar, majroor, sifa, masuf, and all these things. We have spent quite a lot of time studying the labels of grammatical entities. Okay, and fa'il and maf'ul are just another addition to those grammatical entities or those grammatical labels. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, what about the structural thingy? This structural thing is simply the literal meaning of the word in question. Okay, so here we have the literal meaning of someone who teaches. That remains the same in this as well as this instance. Okay, in both the instances, whether it's a fa'il or a maf'ul, the literal meaning of the word teacher would remain the same. Okay, so and why is that? That is because the structural meaning is imparted by the patterns of ism fa'il and ism maf'ul. Okay, so structural meaning or the literal meaning or the structural patterns are actually your ism fa'il and ism maf'ul. Okay, but the grammatical labels or grammatical entities are simply called fa'il and maf'ul. Okay, I hope that this is making sense. Let's see what we have in Arabic now. Okay. Now we have our three root letters of An, Lam, Mim. Okay, which means knowledge. Okay. Allama, this is a fail. Okay, this is a fail, and we'll be doing fail in a lot more detail in the next section, inshallah. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in Allama. Okay, but it means he taught. Okay, all right, he taught. And then we have got the next ism in rafa form. Therefore, we can see or we can conclude that this word here, which is in rafa form, is actually the fa'il, right? So, allamal alimu. The alim or the scholar taught. Who was taught? The word that is in rafa, that the word that is in nasab form. Okay, so allamal alimu al alima. All right, now the same thing is happening over here. Okay, the same thing that I had demonstrated in the English sentence is being rather demonstrated over here in this Arabic equivalent, that allamal alimu, or rather allamal alimul alima. Okay, this word is in rafa, this word is in nasab, but the words once again are the same. Alim, alim, right? Over here it's alim, here as well it is alim. What does it mean? It means that the word itself doesn't change. Okay, why? Because it is on the pattern of fa'il, and the pattern fa'il is to show a doer, right? Just as the word teacher means someone who teaches, al-alimu is someone who knows or who knows too much. Okay, so a scholar. All right. Okay, so once again, being rafa, this is going to be labeled as fa'il, right? And being nasab, this alim is going to be labeled as maf'ul, right? Fi baitil alimi. All right, now this is actually jar majroor fragment, and this is muzaf muzaf alayh fragment. Here, this alimi is actually in jar form, okay, and this entire thing would be your mutalik bil khabar. This is not important at this moment. Focus on allama al-alimul alima. Okay, so once again, I hope that this is making sense so far. That allama al-alimu, since it is rafa, it is going to be labeled as fa'il. And then we have the nasab form, al-alima, it is going to be labeled as maf'ul. So fa'il and maf'ul, they are your grammatical entities, right? Now, what about the structure? As I mentioned before, this is going to be the pattern of fa'ilun. Therefore, it is your ism fa'il, not only fa'il. Okay, so it's going to be ism fa'il. Okay, so this is the concept between fa'il and ism fa'il. Similarly, maf'ul and ism maf'ul. Okay. All right, so whatever I've said so far has been penned down over here. Okay, so let's just give it a read together. The terms of fa'il and maf'ul indicate the action doer and receiver in a sentence. Okay, so any word that is going to be in rafa is going to indicate a doer or a fa'il in Arabic. Okay, and any word that is going to be in nasab form is going to indicate that he has received the action. Therefore, it is going to be labeled, once again, labeled. Okay, this is the important word, labeled as a maf'ul. Okay, and they are, of course, the grammatical entities. Okay, whatever you label something in a sentence is actually a grammatical entity, but the structural pattern is your ism fa'il or ism maf'ul. Okay, the fa'il is always in rafa form irrespective of its pattern. Okay, and maf'ul is always in nasab form irrespective of its pattern. I'll be demonstrating this in a sentence below. Okay, so irrespective of the pattern, no matter what pattern it is, as long as it is in nasab or rafa form, it's going to be labeled as the grammatical entity of maf'ul and fa'il respectively. Okay, and the terms of ism maf'ul and ism fa'il are only the patterns. Okay, and they give us the structural meaning of any word. Okay, they are not the indicators of action, doer, or receiver in a sentence. All right, so just because you see the pattern of fa'il doesn't mean that it cannot be used. I'm sorry, just because you can see the pattern of an ism fa'il doesn't mean that it is not going to be used as a maf'ul in a sentence. Similarly, if you see or just because you see that the pattern gives the meaning of an ism maf'ul doesn't mean that it is not going to be used as a fa'il in any sentence. Okay, for example, you have the pattern of mursilun. Now this, I'm telling you at this moment, is the pattern for ism fa'il. Okay, mursilun, and it means ascender. Okay, and this is the structural meaning. Now there are various forms of mursilun, being an ism, of course. So it can be used as a rafa form, mursilun. It could be used as a nasab form, as mursilan. Okay, and it can also be used as as the jar form, as mursilin. Okay, but in all the scenarios it is going to have the same meaning, ascender, but its grammatical labeling would be different. They can be different. Okay, in mursalan it is rafa, so it can be a fa'il. In mursilan it can be a nasab. It is nasab, therefore it can be used as it can be labeled as a maf'ul. Okay, in same case here, mursalun is the pattern for an ism maf'ul. Okay, but it can be used as a fa'il as well as a maf'ul. Okay, in a sentence, because those are the grammatical entities, and mursalun is your pattern for ism maf'ul. Okay, and it means the one who's been sent. Okay, all right, and these things have been demonstrated here. that both mursalun and mursalun can exist as one of the following grammatical entities. For example, if you want to use it as a fa'il, it can be written as nasara mursilun waladan, right? And if you want to use it as a maf'ul, you can use it as nasab. So nasara mursilan. Once again, the pattern remains the same. In both of the scenarios, you have the word mursilun and mursilan, but over here, in the first scenario, it has been used as a fa'il, hence in the rafa form. Therefore, it would be labeled as a fa'il. And here, in the second scenario, it has been used as the label or as the grammatical entity of maf'ul. Therefore, it has been used, or it has been made rafa. It has been made nasab. Okay, but in both the scenarios, the meaning of um, I'm not sorry, not the meaning. Yeah, the meaning remains the same. Okay, mursalun, once again the one, the sender, a sender, and mursilan, once again a sender. Okay, so finally, just to wrap up our discussion about ism fa'il and fa'il, let's see what I have here. Fa'il versus ism fa'il. Fa'il is the grammatical entity and it is always going to be rafa. Ism fa'il is going to be actually the pattern for doer and it can be rafa, nasab or jar. Okay? Similarly, a maf'ul is a grammatical entity and it is always going to be in nasab form, and ism maf'ul is actually the pattern for an object, but it can be in rafa, nasab or jar because this is the pattern and this is the grammatical entity. Okay, I hope that this thing is clear. All right, and final sentence for this final example: nasara mahmudan hamidan. Right now here, the grammatical entity wise, the word mahmudun has been labeled as fa'il. All right, fa'il. Okay, mahmudun because it's rafa. Okay, and hamidan has been labeled, or rather will be labeled as a maf'ul because it is nasab. Right, however, the patterns of mahmudun and hamidan are actually those of maf'ulun and fa'ilun respectively. Mahmudun rhymes with the pattern of maf'ulun, right? And hamidan corresponds to, or it rhymes with the pattern of fa'ilun, right? So uh, once again, these are the patterns of ism fa'il and ism maf'ul, but grammatically they are going to be labeled as fa'il and maf'ul. Okay, so I hope that this discussion has been has been made clear in your minds. So once you're done with this concept, rest of the stuff just gets really easy. So in this figure, I have given you the patterns used for ism fa'il and ism maf'ul. And guess what? You guys know it already. I'll just have to streamline the information that is already present in your brains. Okay, I'll just have to rewire them, or rather, streamline them. So you all know what a fa'il. I'm sorry, what the patterns for ism fa'il and ism maf'ul are. Okay, you all know, or you guys are all familiar with the pattern, not the grammatical entity, but the pattern of fa'ilun. For example, hamidun, alimun, nasirun. All right, then what else do you have? Zakirun, shakirun, so on and so forth. All right, fa'ilun. This is a pattern for ism fa'il. Okay. Once again, you should also be familiar with the pattern of maf'ulun. Once again, not the grammatical entity, but the pattern of maf'ulun. For example, mahmudun, mashghulun, makhluqun. Alright, so on and so forth. So you guys already know that these two patterns exist, okay? Fa'ilun and maf'ulun. Maf'ulun, of course, is a pattern for ism maf'ul, and fa'ilun is a pattern for ism fa'il, right? Now, um, all right, now this little box over here simply summarizes the difference between fa'il and ism fa'il. Similarly, the differences between maf'ul and ism maf'ul. Okay, so the green ones, over you have the sentence over here, Nasar al Muslimu mu'alliman fi baiti mujahidin. Okay, forget about fi baiti mujahidin because this is not directly related to our discussion at the moment, but look at the um, first three words. Okay, so Nasara is your fail, and al Muslimu being Rafa, it is going to be labeled as a fa'il, alright, which is of course a grammatical entity. Then the word mu'alliman is nasab, therefore it is going to be labeled as maf'ul, hence a grammatical entity. Alright, now the pattern of muslimu is actually the pattern for fa'il of ism fa'il. Okay, we'll be discussing it shortly. Muslimu is the pattern for ism fa'il. Alright, similarly mu'alliman is the pattern for ism fa'il. Okay, so we have the patterns and the grammatical entities. Okay, so this is what. Now I'll be telling you about another pattern of fa'il, of ism fa'il, which all of you are familiar with and you guys use it all the time, but perhaps without knowing. Okay, so inshallah I'll be making that task easy for you too. Okay, so what you see here, you see muf'ilun, the pattern of muf'ilun. I like to call this pattern as a mu words, or the mu files. Okay, why? Because they begin with mu. You have to add a prefix of mu, and actually I'll be teaching you how to make these ism fa'il and ism maf'uls from the verb, and this will be done in the next section inshallah. Over here I'm only telling you how to identify them, because once you begin identifying these things from the mushaf, half of your task would be done already before you reach that particular lesson in the next section. Okay, I'll be teaching you the dynamics of how these things, or how these conversions work, or how these conversions come to pass in the next section, but here once again only the identification from your part is what is required. Okay, so whenever you see any word that begins with a mu, understand automatically that it is either going to be an ism fa'il or an ism maf'ul, all right, or perhaps an ism zarf. I'll come to that in the next lesson. Forget about zarf at this moment. Stick to ism fa'il or ism maf'ul. Okay, so once you see the mu word, okay, you are simply going to understand that it is either an ism fa'il or ism maf'ul. Now, how do you differentiate between the two? If the second root letter, if the second root letter carries a kasra or a zair, okay, it means that it is actually your ism fa'il. Otherwise, otherwise, if otherwise it is going to be an ism maf'ul. Okay, so you have the mu word, okay, the prefix of mu, but the second root letter carries a fatha or a zabar. Therefore, it is going to be it is going to be understood as, its meaning is going to be understood as that of an ism maf'ul. Okay, so this is what. Okay, all right, so now let's just compare these two patterns simultaneously in one screen. Okay, and then we will move on to the further examples and stuff. All right, so you have the mu word. Okay, you have the prefix of mu in both the instances. Once you see the prefix of mu with any word in the musaf, you are going to find out its second root letter, and then you're going to determine the harakah present on that second root letter. Most of the time, in fact, almost always, yeah, you are going to find that second root letter um, as the second last root letter. Okay, so the third root letter is almost always attached to the second root letter. Okay, so in all the instances over here, you can see the same thing. Lam being the third root letter, you can see that the second and the third root letters are always next to each other. Okay, as you can see over here, and that's what. Okay, so whenever you see the mu word, for just simply jump to the last letter and look right behind it. Is that, of course, is going to be your second root letter. So is that second root letter carrying a fatha as in here, or is it carrying a kasra as indicated here? If it is a kasra, it's going to be the pattern of ism fa'il, and if it is carrying a fatha, it's going to be the pattern of ism maf'ul. Okay, and once again, the ism pattern and the grammatical entity are not equal. Okay, they are not identical in any way. All right, now quickly we are going to see these examples. Now, all of these families are going to be studied by us in the next section in a great detail. All right, and what these patterns impart to the word, to the meaning itself. All right, we are going to cover all of that in a huge detail in the next section. Over here, simply get used to these specific families. Okay. So you have the first one, which is mufa'ilun, for example, mujahidun. All right, so you see the mu word, then you jump right to the last letter, and then you see right behind that last letter, you find the third root letter, which over here is an, all right, is carrying a kasra. So it has to be ism fa'il. Okay, let's zoom it up a little bit more. Okay, so you have mujahidun. Similarly, you have mutaqabilun. Okay, so this over here is the last root letter, and right behind it is going to be the second root letter. It is carrying a kasra, therefore it is going to be a pattern for ism fa'il. Similarly, mustaf'ilun, mustansirun, once again, mu word. The second root letter, which is right behind the last letter, is carrying a kasra. Mutakabbirun, what all these words mean, we are going to cover in a huge detail in the next section, inshallah. So don't worry about the fact that you do not exactly understand the meaning or the exact meaning. Okay. Similarly, munharifun, mujtahidun, someone who is hardworking. Muslimun, a submitter. Muallimun, a teacher. Okay. Muallimun, Muslimun, mujtahidun, munharifun. Okay. So these were your patterns for the ism file. Now the same thing happens, but the only difference is that the second root letter is actually going to carry a fatha. So mukhatabun, the one who is spoken to, then muta'awanun, then mustansarun, mutafarraqun. All these are the examples of those words that first of all begin with a mu. Okay, and their second root letter, which is present right behind the last root letter, carries a what? A fatha. Okay. All right, so you have, and yes, my favorite ones actually. So you have the word Muhammadun. Once again, this is the pattern for ism maf'ul. Why? Because the second root letter over here, which is meme, has a fatha over it. Okay, and of course it's a mu word. Okay. Similarly, mursalun, someone who is sent. The word Muhammadun, by the way, means someone who gets praised over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, as a continuous process. And then you have the word muntazarun, the one who is awaited. Okay, so this was your figure. I hope that you have found this useful and understanding. Now a little exercise for you, and then we'll just wrap it up, inshallah. Now there are a couple of words over here, and I would like you to identify them as either ism maf'ul or ism fa'il. Okay, alrighty. So, all right, so we have this word, mukarramatun. All right, now, is this feminine or masculine grammatically? If you guys have done the first section thoroughly, I hope you guys are saying that this is the grammatically feminine noun. Why? Because it has a timer buta over here, and this is a symbol of grammatical femininity. Okay, so this noun is actually your feminine noun. Now, what do we do to make it masculine? You simply check this round the off. So it becomes mukarraman, or mukarramun actually, because it was rafa to begin with. So it becomes mukarramun, right? So if I ask you to identify this as either as an ism file or ism maf'ul, what would your answer be? Just pause the screen for 5 seconds, study this word, and then tell me the answer. I hope that you guys labeled it as ism maf'ul. Why? Because you have the move word. It is a move word, right? You have the prefix of mu, and then you have, let's just zoom it up. Then you have the chucked off suffix, and this is your basic word, okay? Mukarramun. The second root letter is right here behind the last letter, okay? And this carries a fatha. Who carries a fatha in the move word? An ism maf'ul, okay? So it means something given a high respect, okay? Great. Now the same thing happens here. Munawwaratun. Once again, is it masculine or feminine grammatically? I hope you're saying it's grammatically feminine because it has a round over it with it. Okay, so just check it off and it's going to become a regular word. Now, once again, it is a move word, right? And its second root letter, which is present right behind the third root letter, carries what? A fatha. Therefore, it is an ism maf'ul. Okay, Muhammadun alayhi salatu wasalam, we have already discussed this. Okay, ism maf'ul. Now the word mujahidun, once again it's a move word, and the second root letter which is present behind the last root letter is carrying a what? A kasra. Therefore it is an ism fa'il. Okay, and it means somebody who struggles, a struggler. Okay, now apply the same things and you'd be able to understand this thing. So I'll just very quickly go through it. Mufakkirun is a thinker. Why? I want you to pause the video, and if you do not know why it is a thinker, I would ask you to re-listen to the explanation in these two examples or these four examples. You'll know why this is an ism file. Okay. Similarly, Fatihun. What does it rhyme with? Does it rhyme with maf'ulun or does it rhyme with fa'ilun? I hope you're saying the latter. Yeah, it is rhyming with fa'ilun. Therefore, it is going to be a pattern for an ism fa'il, an opener. Okay. Now, I am not translating these words exactly because that is not the point. Okay, it can be used in a number of ways. Okay, usually it is used for somebody who conquers something. Okay, but literally it means an opener. Okay, so in the olden days they had these big huge castles. You all know about that, right? And anybody who opens the castle from the opponents or the enemy's army would be literally an opener of the castle. Okay, so he becomes the conqueror simply. All right, then the word muqtadirun once again is an ism fa'il. Okay, why? Because the second root letter here carries a kasra, and of course it is a move word. Then mutakabbirani. Alrighty, so what do you have here? You see that this is actually the ending sound of ani, right? So it means that it is a suffix of musanna. So you simply check it away. Okay, and what does it become? It simply becomes mutakabbirun, right? The rafa form of singular huwa form. Mutakabbirun. Now can you tell me if it is ism fa'il or ism maf'ul? I hope you guys can, and that you guys are labeling this as the pattern of ism fa'il. Then we have mufassirun. Hang on, mufassiruna, right? Once again, this is going to be ism fa'il. Why? Because after checking off the pattern, after checking off the suffix of una, which is the jama salim rafa suffix, you are left with mufassirun, And mufassirun, you can see, is a move word with its second root letter carrying a kasra. Therefore, it is ism fa'il. And finally, makhluqun, this of course rhymes with the pattern of maf'ulun. Therefore, it is going to be the pattern of ism maf'ul. Okay, something that has been created. Okay, so I hope that this entire thing was clear to you, and if there's any query, of course I can be reached and I'll see how to further clarify it. And give it a watch. It's a very simple topic, but it tends to confuse a lot of people. That's why, therefore, I had to spend a lot of time on this topic, okay? Because it is important for you to know what file is and what ism file is, and what is the difference between file and ism file, and how you can never ever label a file as ism file, or you can never ever determine or conclude as in you can never ever conclude an ism file to be a file. Okay, so that is a blunder because if you make it that's a blunder. Okay, there's no other way of saying that. So that's why you need to know what file and ism file is, and what the differences are what the differences are that are present between them. And well, I hope that these tiny little points have been clarified in your mind. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lesson, inshallah, which would be about zarf and ism zarf. And once again, that's a very easy topic. Okay, if you're clear on this, that topic is going to be a piece of cake. Okay, trust me with that. So now I'm gonna take your leave. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim. Allah Hafiz.